Welcome to Amateur Hour CX, a podcast on the state of cycling from our point of view in the grassroots ranks, or pretty much whatever strikes Eric's fancy based on who he could trick to come on the show today. I'm Mark Walling, and here's your host, Eric Schillinger.
Today's podcast developed out of something that I'm sure not too many people will be surprised about. Me saying something stupid. When we recorded our first attempt at this piece of internet gold, we were talking about the deterrence to people participating in cycling generally, and specifically in racing. And I said something really off the top of my head and really that I didn't think out. And I don't necessarily want to go back and analyze the exact meaning behind it, because it wasn't like I had a lot of intent when I said it. It was just sort of me chatting with Scott Birdsey at the time. And I said, well, I think, Mark, we have the clip, don't we? One of the factors is cycling is super expensive. To get into it, you have to be able to produce the money. That's one of the inhibiting factors. That's why we don't have very many women racing. That's why we don't have any kids racing. It's primarily 35 to 55-year-old professional dudes doing it, guys who have either expendable income or really, I mean, that's it. They have expendable income. If you don't, you can't afford to do it. Here's the deal. We edited out me saying, well, if you listen to the first episode, you know what we edited out. We edited out me saying that women don't race because they don't make enough money to race. And, of course, first of all, I don't want to offend anybody. That's not, I didn't mean that women can't afford to race for any reason that's their own fault or anything like that. There is a practical reality in the world, which is that because we are in a society that is unfairly dominated by men, women make on average 70% of what men make for the same work. And that's wrong, and that should be changed. One of the impacts that you see is when you engage in a super expensive amateur hobby like bike racing, if you are inherently making 30% less money than somebody who has your same job and is a different gender, it might actually be hard to participate in bike racing. So frankly, that's more thought than I've put into that when I said it. But after I said it and it was replayed for me and I said, oh, gee, that doesn't really sound that good. Let's edit it out. It gave me the pause to think about the reality of that and to say, well, gee, if my wife only makes 70 cents on the dollar that I make, it is harder for her to buy a $4,000 bike. It is harder for her to pay $50 to enter a race. It's harder for her to travel and stay overnight just for the sake of riding a criterium somewhere. But all of that is something that I think we should talk about. And frankly, the first person who pointed it out to us that it was maybe something that we shouldn't say, live on the air is not the way to put it, but say in the podcast, is our guest today. She is the director of the NYCROSS team and a up-and-coming racer herself. We have here on the line with us, Shylah Weber.
Hello. How's it going?
Hello, Shylah. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's interesting. And when we were talking about, when we were chatting via the internet about being on the show, I thought one of the things that was noteworthy was the fact that despite the fact that you've taken over running our NYCROSS team for 2018 and you've raced for us for a few years, I actually don't know all that much about your life in general. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that and figure out how you got into bike racing and what makes you crazy enough to do it, but not so crazy as to, not do it successfully.
Okay, fair enough. So I was a runner my entire life. I got some flyer on my desk in second grade that said, join the Elks Club. We have a track team. And every flyer I got, I went home and said, Mom, sign me up for this thing. So that's what I did. And I started running. And when I went to college, I emailed the coach at Columbia and I said, hey, look, I can break 20 minutes in the 5K. You should let me run on your track team. And I got zero response from that because they're all, national champion level athletes. And that is not very fast for a female running 5K. So I, through college, ran with the New York Road Runners Club and after college, kept road racing a little bit. And I guess I got a little bit bored of it and was looking for something else to make it more interesting. And
so wait, you were a high school runner?
Yes. Yeah. So I was I was the MVP of our cross country team when I was in high school. And I went to a tiny little high school. I thought I was really fast.
Were you like pretty good at that?
I mean, I thought I was in high school, but once I got into the real road racing scene, I realized how much mileage you have to really put in. And it took a toll on my body. I started training for marathons and my knees did not like that at all. And I kind of just got bored with it, I think, because I've been doing it my whole life.
This is funny because I think I have just a made up like Shylah origin story in which I think that you were like a super legit runner.
I mean, I wasn't that great. No.
So like you were on ARE eventually, right? The Albany Running Exchange?
Yeah.
Were you like fast?
I don't think I was very fast. I mean, there were certainly women who were faster than me.
What's like your time at the Boilermaker?
I had like a 64, I think.
Is that good? I don't even know why I asked you that because I don't even know what a good time would be.
I think my boyfriend runs like a 48, so I don't think it's very
your boyfriend. Good. Yeah, right. I would if I did the Boilermaker.
It's solid.
You want to hear a funny running story? I was convinced by my wife to do the Del Mar Dash.
Okay.
Like a few years ago, and I was just like, yeah, whatever. I can just run a 5K. Like I'm not gonna win, but I can make it 3.1 miles.
Well, there's your first mistake because it's 5 miles. It's not a 5K.
I learned that at mile like 2.8 when I was like kind of, I mean, look, I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea. I was definitely in like last place to begin with, but I was like trying to get it over with. And then I found out that I was really like halfway there and I was already trying to sprint. So yeah, that can happen too.
Yeah.
So, okay, you were a member of New York Roadrunners. And then you came to, well, you're from here. So eventually you completed college and decided to return to the greater Capital District.
Yes. So I came back for work. I had a job up here that I liked. So I came back. And so, yeah, I joined ARE. I did the local running scene for a while. And I mean, it was like the same races, the same people all the time. And I don't know. I wanted some more excitement, I guess. So
I've been to some ARE events. I think they're really fun. You know,
yeah, they're fun. But it's not as fun as riding a bike, I found out later.
Well, no, it's not as fun as riding a bike. That's true, because you don't get to ride a bike,
right?
Which is inherently fun.
You can't go as fast.
So how did you, so you eventually got introduced to cycling? Somebody you knew was a member of CBRC.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So then I started riding with them. And I went on.
When was that? Like, what kind of year? What are we talking about this happening?
I think I first bought a road bike in 2011. And so I went for rides with them, flat pedals, was afraid to clip in, and I couldn't keep up. I thought I was terrible. And I decided, well, maybe there's this duathlon, triathlon scene. If I mix running and biking, I could be like kind of good at both and then really good at this whole thing if I can put them together the right way. Because I swam in high school too, just because we didn't have an indoor track team in high school. So I did a little bit of that in college just to stay in shape. And so I started with duathlon because I was very afraid of dying in the mass start swims. Yeah. And so I did really well with like a couple of the New York duathlons. And then at the end of that season, so I think that was probably 2012, I decided, okay, there's this triathlon out in Crystal Lake. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I start off on the swim and I try to keep up with these people. And 2 minutes in, I decided I was drowning. I looked for the kayak, like just tread water for a while, wait for everybody to go by me because I was just getting punched and kicked and pulled under the water and I panicked. So I let people go, decided to keep going, and then got on the bike through the run. And somehow I came in third place. And I was like, okay, well, if I can almost drown and come in third place, let me try this again. So I went and did another local one. I was out in Dwaynesburg.
Thoughts had by every successful triathlete.
If I don't drown, I will do better. So it had a very, very short swim, also a very small event. And so I went and did that and I won. And I was like, okay, I need to go get a tri-bike. I need
a pointy helmet.
Yes. No. To this day, I have never worn a pointy helmet. I will not
Good
do
for
it.
you. Your head is naturally aerodynamic.
So I go over to Plains in Schenectady, and they had a flyer there for HRRT. And I was like, well, I can't afford this tri bike. I didn't realize these things were $5,000. And the kid says, well, here's this team. If you join them, it won't be that expensive. And I was like, yeah, right. I don't know what I'm doing yet. Why would I be on this team? So I wrote this long essay and got on this team. And so this eventually brings me to how I decided the following year, I had a really successful tri season, but that kind of ends in August. And so everybody's talking about this cyclocross thing. And to me, I think it kind of was reminiscent of cross country in high school, the way that everybody was talking about it. And I said, you know what? That sounds more fun than running a marathon in the fall. Although I think the first year I did that too, which was really stupid.
That's what you're not the only person who's ever said.
No, the first one was before that. The first one, I sprained my ankle, didn't do anything for 2 months, and then decided I was signed up, so I still had to do this marathon, and almost passed out because I didn't know I needed to eat or drink during a marathon and got bike aid. But that's a different story.
Would you say that you're fairly determined and stubborn about these types of things?
I think it helps in some respects and hinders me in others, obviously. But
okay, so you're on HRRT, and cyclocross is something that's presented to you as a fall alternative to running a marathon, and you decide that you're going to do, both, but ultimately you kind of flop into cyclocross being what you want to do.
Right. So I went out.
Do you remember your first cyclocross race?
Oh yeah. So I went out.
What race was it?
It was when NYCROSS had the Adirondack race out at Johnstown, I think it was.
Oh yeah, that was you. That's funny because that means your first cyclocross race was the only time that NYCROSS was in the Adirondack cyclocross race. Yeah,
I like that. I like that one.
It was fine. Yeah, it was a good event. A reoccurring theme is me mentioning the difficulty of event promotion, and that was an event that sort of demonstrated that because they had a good crew, they had a pretty good venue, they had a course that was a completely fine course. I don't mean to be negative. I'm not saying that it was a bad course or a good course. But they had everything about it was as good as we could ask for as far as a first year NYCROSS event. And then they basically didn't have the volunteer crew and the people to run it another time. They said that was too much work for us to do, and the whole thing just fizzled out, which
too bad.
It's too bad, but it illustrates the difficulty of putting these events on. If you're listening to this and you're ever thinking, gee, these events are fun, what can I do to help? Email one of the promoters of these events and say, how can I help? Because we do need more help. There's never too much help. Preaching done. So you went to the Adirondack Cross. Did you race the very beginner race? Probably you raced the Cat 5 race or the Cat 4 race?
So I'm going to go back.
I don't think there was Cat 5 women yet. I think it was still Cat 4 women only then.
Yeah.
That was new for this year.
So yeah, it was just Cat 4, but I'm going to go back 2 days to when I found a used bike for $400, went to one cyclocross practice, and I think I actually went to the cyclocross practice on an old 26 mountain bike because I didn't have the bike yet. Rode around in circles and thought, okay, I'm ready to do this, bought the bike, and then raced a day later. I don't even think I had ridden the bike before I went to this race. So
that's the way to do it. Actually, the first time I ever rode a cyclocross bike was at a race also. So that's not the worst thing that could ever happen.
No. So at this point, I think I could pedal okay, but I had never ridden a bike off-road. I had done triathlons and that was it. I think I maybe did one of the Trooper Brinker off races or whatever. So we get on the start line and I sprint off like a maniac and I'm like, okay, I can do this. There's kind of a turn and you go into the woods. And I braked probably a little hard going into the turn, didn't really know what I was doing. And then there's this mud pit. And so I immediately just send my front tire into this mud pit, stop pedaling, freak out, over the handlebars, flop in the mud as everybody is behind me, not running me over, but almost running me over. And I didn't know what to do. And I just kind of sat there and waited and said, now what do I do? How do I come back from that?
Get back on and you go.
Yeah. Well, and there was a bunch of people there watching. It was very embarrassing. So I get back on and now I realize I don't know how to ride this bike. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never ridden in the woods before. And I eventually finished and I think I did terribly. And it was kind of okay, maybe I'm not good at this thing. This isn't for me. But I did a couple more races that year. I think I did Troy, and that was a little bit better for me. Probably mostly because Andy came up to me after the race, and he looks at my tires, and he presses on them. He goes, "What is wrong with you?" I was like, What? And he's like, "How much air is in these tires?" And I was like, 100 PSI. He just looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, what's wrong with that? That's what I put in my road bike. I had no idea. So
I'm amused by the commonality, though, to these things. These are not mistakes that are unique to Shylah Weber. These are absolutely typical first cyclocross race mistakes. I also rode my cyclocross bike for the first time, the first cyclocross bike I had at a cyclocross race. I don't think I put 100 PSI in my tires the first time, but I definitely, now I'd ridden mountain bikes though. I had raced mountain bikes for a long time, and then I started racing road bikes, and then I got sucked into cross in a similar story of people were all racing cross. So I went to race cross, and I think I put 85 PSI in my tires the first time I pumped them up to go do cyclocross, because, it's like in between what you run on the mountain bike and road bike. I was like, well, it's knobby like a mountain bike, but it's skinny like a road bike, so average the two out. So I think that's very reasonable. Who would think that you would run 20 PSI? That doesn't seem reasonable at all. Right?
No.
So you survived your first cross race, and that was a Category 4 women's race that was probably 30 minutes long and at 8 o'clock in the morning, right?
Oh, yeah. So the ground is all wet and slippery, and you don't know anything about that because you've been practicing in the afternoon on the grass. So that's a new thing to have fun with. Now,
you said you raced a few more times that year, but would you say you felt like you were hooked and 2 more times was the most that you could make it? Or was that you kept going, somebody convinced you to keep going, and you tried it again?
So I think I was marathon training, and I think it was kind of I was going to do the NYCROSS races, and I think I made most of them, and then maybe Bethlehem, because Bethlehem is a super pedally course, so I didn't have to be as technical, and I think I came in 3rd place there, and I was second? Okay, second. Mark knows. Fact check. I guess I should pull up my cross results so you don't have to fact check me on everything.
Already have it up.
So I was like, okay, maybe I'm getting better at this. I'll stick with it and I'll try again next year.
And then the next year you'd learned to put 20 PSI in your tires and you rode your bike more than once off-road.
Correct. I still didn't know how to maintain my bike or do anything. I think I always had somebody else kind of there saying, that doesn't look right, and fixing my bike for me.
How long did it take before you made the jump from that beginner's race to we sadly in most events that I've come across, not just our NYCROSS races, but the New England races, most of the events around locally offer either 1 or 2. 2 is better, but they don't typically offer a whole range of women's ability level categories. They usually offer kind of a beginner category and then a category for everyone who's done this before. Right.
And so that was super scary to me. It was I think I remember it was probably towards the end of my second season where I started doing better. So I was still running at that point. So cyclocross was not my priority. But I was having fun with it. And I think towards the end of that, there was Wicked Creepy and then Bethlehem again. And I was doing well. And I was I don't want to do well because that means I'm going to have to go race the Cat 1, 2, 3 field. And I don't want to do that. That's scary to me. So there really isn't that middle ground at any of the local races. So I kind of said, okay, well, we'll see what happens next year. So now I think we're at 2015. And that was when I really started saying, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself to this. I'm going to try to do better with this. And I think that was also the year I ended up upgrading, which I think I did. Somebody mentioned this in one of the other podcasts. I did it because I didn't want to have to get to maybe Northampton at 8 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to be able to race at 11 a.m. So I said, okay, fine. I have the points. It's finally time to upgrade to Cat 3. And I think that was where I really realized that those bigger races, because of the attendance they get, it makes for a really cool race because you're not just blowing out a field of Cat 4s anymore. You're coming in top 10 or something with all these other Cat 3s. And there's this huge field of women, and it was super inspiring. And they're like, who are you? Where'd you come from? Like, they noticed that you're a new woman in the field. And that was like the first camaraderie I think I felt in it, because when you're kind of in the Cat 4 field, you're with a bunch of other people who don't really know what's going on. And also, so at the time, I think they were running the juniors races with us in the NYCROSS series. So I'd have Tommy flying up from behind me. And like, that was my racing experience to start with, was kind of this strung out Cat 4 field, afraid to jump up to the elite field. And then we're racing, like jostling around with juniors. So I think I really fell in love with it when I started going to those bigger races and had that experience of like racing shoulder to shoulder with other really, you know, experienced, fast women.
Other women who were of the, you know, at least the same ability level as you versus
exactly
a bunch of juniors. And, you know, I mean, the data that we look at is not, it doesn't support a beginner's women's race from just a purely event logistics standpoint. We have, sadly, 4 or 5 women sometimes at most, you know?
Yep.
As a racing experience, especially coming over from running and from triathlons, where, I mean, there's a lot of women who are runners. There's a lot of women at triathlons. What was that like showing up at, say, your first couple of races and it's 8:00 in the morning? There's 4 other women that you're going to race. Plus it's a mixed field with men, women, and all sorts of, you know, kids and weird other additional people involved in the field. What did you think of that?
So I think being at the race, it was kind of always a little bit disappointing, I guess, when you get up to the start line and you realize, like, this is it. This is all that showed up. Now, I think you're happy because you're there and you maybe know those people and you know, like, okay, I'm going to be battling with this person or that person. And once you get to know the other people who show up every week, it's okay. But I think at first it was sort of just this hodgepodge field that was confusing when you've got the minute in between starts and fields are overlapping each other. It's a little bit difficult to manage. And I think I felt the whole, like I was like the one, you know, young female in the group that we were riding with at the time too. And it's tough to just go out and like be with the guys all the time. And I think ever since I started cycling, I've been looking for females that like I can just go ride with, because you don't have that same, like, when I was running with ARE, we had women's long run on Sunday and it was your girl time, you know, you had 8 or 10 women and you could just go talk for 2 hours while you ran. And you didn't have that once I switched to cycling. It was just so male dominated.
Why do you think that is?
I don't think it's because we make less money, but I mean,
no, I don't think that either, of course.
I know. So I think part of it is,
although I don't think you should make less money either. I think everyone should get paid the same for the same work, but that's a digression.
I thought you were going to stop after everyone should get paid the same, and I was a little worried.
No, I do. Actually, you know, it's funny that you say that, because sitting on my bookshelf, I can see a copy of the Communist Manifesto, but it doesn't mean that I subscribe to those tenets.
Okay. That's another podcast. So
Eric the Communist.
So sorry, I forgot what we were talking about before communism.
We were talking about so what we're really trying to talk about is why don't women race? When we have, so from a math perspective, approximately 85% of the people who are involved in cycling are men. Mm-hmm. And I don't even, that might actually be an understatement. You know, that's looking at the local races. I know that if we have 200 people come to a NYCROSS race, on average, there's around 50. I'm sorry, the math is wrong. There's about 15 women who come for 200 people. So it's not 85%. Right. It's 93% or whatever.
7.5.
Mark, check me.
Yes.
So why do we have less than 10% participation from women? And I mean, I'm cognizant of, and I don't want to place the entire plight of cycling and the reason that women are not treated fairly in cycling on you just because you're a woman. I don't think that's fair either to say that, but we can talk about it, at least from the perspective of you have had to do some of the things that, you know, as a series promoter, as an event promoter, I've never had to do. I've never had to show up at a race and race 4 other women, 5 juniors, 10 guys on single speeds, and also, you know, whatever, I don't know, something else. There's and also 12 Cat 5 men, because depending on, you know, how far back you go, that was the That was the experience some women had, was
That's
racing
terrifying.
right along with the Cat 5 men, plus with juniors, plus with maybe junior girls also, all at once. And some years with staggered starts, some years everybody going off together. So, we've refined it a bunch of times, and in quotes, refined. We've changed it and monkeyed around with it, perhaps never fixing it,
Yeah. So one of the things I used to think that prevented women from getting into cycling was some of the mechanics of the bike maintenance, because it's just, I am not mechanically inclined. And I think that, I'm going to be a little stereotypical. I realize I'm generalizing. It's not everyone, but that women tend to be a little bit less mechanic. But I don't necessarily think that's true, because there's plenty of women who are involved in triathlon, like you pointed out, and you still have to maintain your bike there. It's a little harder in cyclocross when you're, knocking your derailleur off or breaking other things. But so I don't think it's any of that. I think part of it is the having like a safe space to play in and to get used to it before you have that embarrassing moment in your first race, where it's a very public moment, is having somewhere to go and learn. And I think having those weekly night practices where, we go and learn how to corner, and you learn what to do with your bike. You learn how to get over the barriers. You're not just trying it for the first time on a race course. I think things like that make it a lot more welcoming for anybody, but specifically for women. And I also think, the fact that it is so male dominated makes it hard for women to want to be there. It extends into road, even where, you're on a group ride and you kind of feel like, I'm the only woman here. Like, should I be here? I ride with a bunch of gentlemen. But there are times where they have some, off the cuff guy humor sort of thing. And you sort of feel like, do I belong in this boys club? So I think that's part of it. And then the other thing, we already talked about the fields. So it's sort of this like vicious cycle of women don't show up. So they get these combined fields. So then they don't show up because those combined fields suck. So you might show up once or twice, but who wants to continue to race like that? The thing that made me want to continue racing was that day at Northampton when I was finally in a field that was good for me,
And what is that? What's that field in Northampton? They're running a 3-4 field and then the UCI field, right?
No, so they have a Cat 4 field, beginner field, which I now I think is 4-5. And then in the middle of the day, they do a Cat 3 only field. And that's like this very appropriate challenge. So there's something in like learning theory, right? Where you have to be appropriately challenged to continue learning. So you can't be overly challenged. You can't get bored. And I feel like that's what it is the Cat 1, 2, 3 field is this overly challenging, intimidating thing. So people cower from it at first. And then the Cat 4 field, if you're, reasonably physically fit, becomes boring. And when there's no middle ground to sort of challenge you without intimidating you, it's very hard to keep going.
I think everything you're saying is absolutely correct. So for you went out to Northampton, you saw what a major international event looks like. That's the first international event that was held in the United States. It's the longest running UCI event in the United States. It's run by the pure godfather of cyclocross that we all bow to. This is not the same as what I've been doing at these local races. I want to do more of this.
Absolutely. It was really cool. I was so much happier to come in top 10 there than I ever was to, win one of these Cat 4 fields, because to me, like once you got to a certain point, it didn't mean anything. Like, again, the field's 4 or 5 women, who cares? Right. Not that they're all, all trying hard and everybody's still learning, but it wasn't the same competitiveness of being back and forth with a few people. And you really had to be on every moment in order to hold your position at a race like that. And it pushed you to this different level.
It's so interesting to me that going to Northampton for the first time was an experience that caused you to sort of solidify your idea that you wanted to do this. The first time that I raced Northampton, which is, Jesus, it really is like, 15 years ago at this point. God, it's probably more than that. I left and I came back. We didn't have the NYCROSS scene yet. It was before NYCROSS existed. And I came back from that and said, we have to make that here. And now we haven't made that. We've made something that I like to think of as like an 8/10 scale version of that. But I think more than a few people have been to Northampton specifically and left going, this is a thing that we have to do.
Oh, yeah.
And it's it's interesting to me.
It's a very, very well run event. You have great fields there. It's a great turnout, and it's a good time.
So what about that? Do you think can be adopted to like a grassroots scene that would help, say, think of the hypothetical person. I don't even know who they are, but the hypothetical woman who's that next person coming over from triathlon who's been convinced by the local cycling club to give cyclocross a whirl. What can we adopt? What would you say? Copy this thing from Adams Fields. Do this or do that, and it would make it more engaging for that future version of me to keep coming back.
Sure.
Because we have nearly 100% attrition in Cat 4 and Cat 5 women's racing. The number of women who race for one season or two, never upgrade, and never come back is the vast majority of all the women who are racing. The number of women who make that jump up into Category 3 or further is, I don't know a number off the top of my head, but it's a tiny fraction from my experience of running these local races for years and years and years. It's not a progression where you see women come along and upgrade and upgrade and upgrade, and then the field starts to grow, and the next thing you know, you have a group of women racing that's a large number.
Right.
Beginners are beginners for a season, and then we never see them again is the most common outcome for someone trying cyclocross as a woman.
Yeah.
What do we need to change?
So, I think, and you guys have already started to go this way. This year was awesome not having the single speeders come riding through your race. When Andy's buzzing your wheel on a single speed and, you're up there battling in the top few women in this elite race you guys have, that is not fun. And then you kind of have this weird, should I be polite and let these guys around me? And no, this is really my race. I shouldn't do that. And so I think, giving the women their own field has made a huge difference. And I think the Cat 4 women, that's going to be even bigger because obviously they're the ones that are going to choose, do I stick with this or not? Well, Cat 5 now, I guess. And I think making sure that they have their own field and, some kind of, there's no female camaraderie at all. So I think the idea of these women's clinics, and not just like a clinic for, hey, you're a beginner, but it's really welcoming to women and put on by women. So you've got to find, those women in the community that are willing to take the time and teach other women. And I think that's huge too.
We should maybe do a spoiler alert and explain what the women's clinic is. I don't know that I've gone into detail in it. We keep talking about the idea that a women's clinic will one day happen. The idea that we have for the NYCROSS series this year is that there will be a professional elite racer running clinics at each of the races, a female elite racer who will be named soon, running a clinic that will basically start at 9 a.m. approximately for any Category 4 or Category 5 woman attending the race. There'll be an opportunity to work with a pro coach on skills, on technique, on things like not having 100 PSI in your tires. And I say that with a smile on my face, but it's a learning curve thing that is by far not intuitive. And I agree with you 100% that if I had a road bike and a cyclocross bike and I looked at the two, I wouldn't automatically, I personally didn't. I did the same thing the first time I did that, right? So helping get these things that are the barriers, no pun intended, to successfully racing cyclocross out of the way. There's going to be opportunity for women to participate in a clinic that will be no charge. You'll have to pay for the race entry, so you'll pay your normal race entry fee. But if you're registered for the 4 or 5 women's race, you'll have an opportunity to participate in a clinic, to prep, spend time with a pro, getting coached, do a download session after the race to talk about what worked and what didn't. And the beauty of it is it's going to be at all 5 or 6 events, however many events are in the series, which will be sorted soon. The series events are going to have it going consistently, hopefully with the same coach at every event. So there'll be, if we're lucky, the beginning of that community and that consistent group of people who all know each other and who are racing against each other. That's the clinic idea. So now that we've explained that, I suppose we could talk about it,
Yeah, I think so when I first learned, I had Jen and Don and John Stillman, and they sat there and did drills with me. John Stillman basically slammed my seat down as far as it could to try to get rid of my little hop when I was remounting the bike. And, they spent a lot of time explaining all these small little details to me that that first year, I didn't have any of that. And I just kind of ran into things and rode all over the place and had no clue what I was doing. So I think, if you're looking at a lot of females in this running triathlon community, they're coming off a road bike. They don't know how to do any of this off-road handling necessarily. Now, obviously, you've got other people coming from mountain biking who maybe that's a little more easy for. But I think if you look at where you can pull women from, those are the two big pools of people who are already an endurance athlete, maybe looking for a change of pace, that it's the technical stuff that would be really helpful. So the clinic certainly would help teach you that. But also the mechanical stuff. I mean, I still am honestly terrible with it. Dave Beals will check my bike out before I'm ready to go to the starting line, and he spends 20 minutes with it because it's so messed up.
Find 20 minutes worth of repairs 5 minutes before the race is about to start.
Exactly. And he says, we'll just have to deal with this later. It's good enough. But that's another thing is, having neutral support available. I remember I was out at, I think it was Silk City, and I was by myself. There was nobody else from NYCROSS there. And I had an issue with my bike before the race, and I didn't know what to do. I had moved my seat and I sheared off the bolt because I cranked down way too hard when I was trying to put it back on, because I do that. I don't look at the torque wrench. So I needed a new seat post clamp, and there's no neutral support, and I'm just running around like looking for someone to help me. And that could have made or broken my race. Some guy just happened to be there and save my day. But I think having that support system of either neutral support or somebody within, the local community who kind of says, I'm here to help you if you have a problem with your bike.
So and this is probably really a gender neutral observation, but as a beginner, neutral support, certainly a team, right? But if you're really a real pure beginner, you may not have a team with support guys there. Interesting. So neutral support probably as a beginner really is a thing that.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think
is attractive.
It gives you somewhere to go where you can admit that you don't have a clue what's going on. And I mean, obviously, you should be learning these things along the way. And I'm learning all these lessons the hard way, right? But when you start out,
that's an interesting observation, though. The culture of bike racing does tend to draw a lot of folks who are type A personality folks who act like they know better, or that you should know if you don't know what's going on. And that's probably an initial commentary, just when an observation of it in and of itself is important. As racers, as people who know what we're doing, when I go to a race, and I have a different outlook because A, I'm not really a competitive racer in the sense of somebody who's fit in racing, and B, I have all this promotional background. So I tend to try to, if people can have a nice time and I can help them, I'd rather do that than scoff at them for not knowing. But a lot of people don't approach it that way. A lot of people act like they want to, be friendly, and then when it's actually time to really do something to help, they don't want to. That's probably a thing to consider. If you're a racer who's been around for a million years and there's somebody running around the parking lot who doesn't seem to have the first clue of what they're doing, say, hey, what's going on? Do you need help? Because that person needs to come back over and over and over to become, somebody who's into the hobby. They're not going to do that if they go and they have a bad experience once and then they go and have a bad experience a second time. Most people aren't coming back that third time.
Absolutely. And if your bike breaks and you don't know what's going wrong and nobody's there to help you. And I think, it's definitely a beginner thing, but when you think about, okay, now I'm the only female here and I don't want to look stupid. I'm already, the dumb blonde, blah, blah, blah. I don't want you to think I'm an idiot.
Oh God, that's such a valuable observation, and it maybe it's probably something that you're experiencing all the time at a race that 93% of the people at the race are never experiencing. Right? I'm never going to go there and be one of 5 or 6 people who are like me walking around. I'm never going to get labeled. I might get labeled as the big fat guy who won't shut up, but I'm not going to ever get labeled as that woman who showed up and doesn't know how to put air in her tires or whatever. Right.
And you hear guys talk about that, and this girl's clueless. She doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't even know how to put air in her tires. And then you say, well, I don't know how to do this other thing. I don't want to be that.
You don't want to ask and be the girl who doesn't know how to put. The girl who didn't know how to tighten the bolt on her seat post and broke it.
So I just went the complete opposite way.
Because none of us have ever done that,
I went the complete opposite way with it, and I said, you know what? I'm going to play that dumb blonde, and then everybody will fix my bike for me, and I don't have to do it.
That's an interesting strategy to actually just go 100% embrace the stereotype and manipulate it. See, this is why you're a graduate of an Ivy League school. You're just like, I know how to get what I need done, and I'm going to make it happen.
It works.
You know, I've also got a copy of Machiavelli here on my bookshelf. I suppose you're probably familiar with that.
A little bit.
So now you race. Do you have a Category 3 license? I don't even know what kind of license you have, right?
I do. I was really hoping, I think I part way to Cat 2, and I was hoping to do that this year, and then Mark decided it would be a good idea for me to separate my shoulder. So I didn't really get to race this year, so that'll be my goal.
When you say this year, you mean the season that has passed now.
So, that's actually something we should talk about, though. So you could crash on a bike and really effing hurt yourself, and that doesn't happen running, right? So that's kind of scary. Like, I never thought I would end up with my arm like hanging off of my body, getting picked up and going to get x-rays because I didn't know what was going on. And then I can't ride my bike for however long. And so that's something that's scary. And, you know, I'll generalize again, but I think women are typically a little bit more afraid of death and are a little more responsible than men can be with their well-being. And, you know, so maybe they're just being smart because they don't want to end up like that. But, you know, racing bikes is definitely a little more dangerous in that respect.
I mean, it's a lot more dangerous for sure. I think that's a legitimate observation, and without being horribly, you know, gender biased, I think it's true to say that on average, in a completely stereotypical way, you know, there's a lot of guys who are not interested in examining the risk that their own decisions put on their life, right? I mean, and in a lot of ways, in an extremely stupid way, right? I mean, I've gone in ambulances more than a couple times because of bike racing. You know, a month before I started law school, I had a concussion. And I didn't know where I was for about 8 hours, right? I mean, you know, all because I thought it would be cool to try to win a Cat 4 crit in Northampton, Massachusetts, of all places, right? You know, that's not something, though, that I don't know that applies as like the reason. Maybe that's a reason that not as many women are racing. But I don't know if it's a reason that women aren't coming back. Right. You know, when you have 5 people racing, and then the next year you have 5 people racing again, but it's 5 new people. You know, we have no development of. Well, okay, wait a minute. I was going to say we have no development of like Cat 5s into Cat 4s into Cat 3s, and that's to some degree true. We have, you know, 1 in 50 or something, but. In New England, that doesn't seem to be the case. At the larger events, now they're drawing from maybe a larger geographic area, but you do have, I mean, how many women are racing the Category 3 field if you go to a New England Series race? There's probably, 50, you know, a field of 50. Are they filling? Are they, yeah, it's not necessarily filling the way the men's field sells out and it's 125 people, but it's a field it's a, you know, not a full field by literal sense, but it's a complete group. It's a race that has, you know, a front group, a big middle group, and people in the back, not just one person in each of those positions.
Exactly. And so that's where it gets a little more physical. And, you know, you have to be well-natured enough with going shoulder to shoulder with somebody and getting pushed around. I mean, so especially I'm, you know, on the smaller side in some of these races, these girls have, you know, 50 pounds on me and they want to push me out of the way. They can, you know, there's nothing I can do about it. I've ended up in the tape more than once with somebody who is, you know, much larger than I am, and I couldn't do anything about it. So it is more physical than anything like running or triathlon. In those sports, you're on your own, you know, you're not really rubbing elbows with anybody. So there's that aspect of it too.
So is that something that you like, or is that something you think is a deterrent?
I get very, very angry about it. I don't like when people kind of try to muscle me around. But instead of saying, well, I'm not doing this anymore, I decide I'm just going to go pedal faster because I'm not going to let somebody push me around. But I could very easily see it going the other way of just, you know what, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be pushed around. I'm done. I'll go race my bike. I'll do a time trial or something that isn't as physical.
Now, as a guy, I don't think that's ever something that's crossed my mind. Right. I mean, this is probably a theme for this entire podcast. Things as a man I've never thought before because I'm not a woman. But, you know, I suppose that's another, I don't know, again, I don't know if this is a men are from Mars, women are from Venus conversation ultimately. Maybe that's, you know, maybe that's part of it. Dudes I know who end up rubbing elbows in a race either think it's awesome or then they want a fist fight afterwards. But nobody says, I'm not going to come anymore because that happened.
Right. And I mean, you know? I don't know that I've seen anybody walk away specifically because of that, but I can see that being intimidating, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it isn't, for sure. It's intimidating. Oh, man. Bike racing. So intimidating. And if you were, you know, in a lot of ways, this conversation, if you think of it, we're basically saying women are smarter than men. They don't want to do a really expensive, dangerous thing that might result in a fist fight. That's what really the conclusion that we're drawing. Why do so few women come to this? Because they have sense.
It's kind of true. But if you look at also, you know, who's promoting these events, who's putting these events on? Are there women involved in that? And I think that's another.
You know why? You know that's actually a good question. Why? I suppose to some degree it's probably just a percentage thing, right? If 93% of the participants in this activity are men, and only 0.5% of the participants in the activity are promoters, then the odds. I don't know if that. I don't. Yeah, I mean that.
Yes, math works.
That math probably just about works, right?
And I mean the people who are the promoters are not some other group of people. It's generally people who have participated in the sport, you know? So if you're pulling from that participation group, you're not going to get many women. But I think, you know, the fact that you guys as promoters of the series are looking for input from women who are actually going to come and race. I mean, that right there is a great first step.
What would we have to do to get women? I mean, you're running our team, right? So that's the first time that we've had a female director sportif, and you don't see that too often. You know, even the elite team that was the elite team out of the Capital District for a few years, the Zimmer team. Andy ran the team. Andy was the director sportif, and then he had a bunch of women that raced in the team. I mean, you think that makes a difference? Do you think if you have more teams run by women, is that going to, you know, how many women do we have on our team? Victoria, who is a college student, so she's not a junior technically anymore, right? I mean, not technically. I mean, she's U23 is what she is. Maggie is a junior, and yourself,
right? And that's it. You know, so we have kind of one in each age bracket. And again, you're one, and that's I think part of the problem, right? Is like I have to make the decision that I'm going to spend all my time with a bunch of dudes, which presents other, you know, social problems for you in ways. I've had boyfriends who are super jealous because I'm out riding my bike with guys all the time. And is that really okay? You know? And it's not like I have the option to just go ride with the girls or anything. And that can be tough on your personal life. Or you spend a lot of time alone if you want to go that route with it, which I think, again, generalizing, but women tend to be very social creatures. You know, we like that like long run experience of bonding with somebody over this endurance sport. The pain cave for 3 hours by yourself. I mean, it sucks for everybody, but that's, you know, we get into it partially because of the social aspect. So if there isn't that social aspect for us, what draws you?
Yeah, and that's not unique to women. Men are drawn to this also for the social aspect, but just as we've sort of been dancing around the idea, Nathaniel threw it out there previously, that men are going out and doing this, and it gives men an opportunity to go out and do that, you know, virile bear hunting, hunter, you know, caveman instinct activity, and that is a social opportunity. You know, I mean, when I was really, really racing, I started to realize that I had to do more rides by myself than rides with groups, but I don't think that I would have gotten to the point where I was able to really race and train and be fit and then sacrifice group rides to get faster if I didn't have the opportunity to do the group rides to begin with, to become obsessed with the sport and say it's really fun and I love going to these races every weekend and I'm going to travel with a whole crew of people that are on my team. You know, that social component of it is critical. So we gotta have.
Oh, absolutely. It keeps you getting out the door every time. You know, you want to go do a 4-hour ride. That's really hard to do by yourself.
So how many women were you running with on ARE that you would have said, and I know ARE works differently than say like a Devo cycling team does, or even a club cycling team, but did you have a crew of 10 women, 15 women that would do, you said there was long run Sundays?
Oh yeah. And we'd have pancakes afterwards, turn it into brunch, whatever. And it was, then you go out and get drinks with them some other time during the week or something like that. And not only that, we had these track workouts. So you're pushing each other at these track workouts. And I think that there's something different when you're in the same competition group too and pushing each other. So if, we're on a group ride and the guys decide, okay, we're going to hammer this Strava segment, I kind of roll my eyes and say, this doesn't, mean anything to me. It's just boys being boys. And I kind of let it go. Where if it's the people who you're competing with, it's a little bit more incentive to make that jump and work a little harder to stay with them. I don't feel bad if, Scott Birdsey drops me on a ride, but if it's another female, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to do my best to hang with her because that's my competitive group.
Yeah. How do we get some of those women who are those 15 women that you're running with on ARE, which is a larger collection with certainly more than 15 women across the board? How do we get some of them to come over and do this?
So I did some of that. I would turn long run into long run and then go on, an easy ride after. And I had, at least a couple of them who would ride with me, but they kind of all trended towards triathlon. And I think that's a good transition, right? Because you're already good at running. You pick up the cycling thing, the swim, okay, you don't drown. It's the best anyone can hope for.
For cycling, one of the best things for growth in cycling is the fact that triathlon has a swim in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because who wants to do that?
If duathlon was like as popular as triathlon was, no one would switch to cycling. They would all just be time trialing and running.
Swimming is actually like super wonderful in all kinds of different ways, but it's not that mass start swim thing is terrifying. I'll shock our listening community and say that when I was concluding my experience as a hobby serious bike racer, I did a season where I did a bunch of triathlons, and by a bunch I mean probably 5 or 6. I actually didn't realize that a lot of triathletes basically train and prepare for one triathlon, or maybe a few in a season, but not necessarily like one every weekend. And I treated a triathlon schedule like you would treat like a criterium schedule, which really didn't work. Side note. No, that does not work.
Does not work. I know that now. But what I was going to say is I actually really enjoyed the swimming. The thing I liked the most out of triathlon was doing the swimming because it was somewhat foreign. I had never swam before in any competitive sense. So it was interesting to go out and do these open water swims that I never did. And I was really not a very good swimmer. I'm sure no one is shocked when I say that. But it was fun to be like, I'm actually going to go swim 2 miles? That's crazy. I never thought I could even do that,
Oh, yeah. And it exhausts your entire body. Like, there's nothing like it.
So nonetheless, these women they trend, the people who come from running, who then become interested in bicycles, trend into triathlon. Right. And then from there, I mean, they're just stuck in a big pit of water and they can't get out. How come nobody then goes from? How come nobody goes from there? Is there like just no ladder in the pool?
I don't exactly know. Once I was on the bike and I was like, this is the fastest thing I can do, and I think it's a little bit of that like adrenaline rush that maybe women are too smart to want, for the most part. But that's what I liked about it, right? And that's why I said, well, running doesn't give me quite that rush. Why don't I just do this bike thing full time? But it is such a, so here's the other thing, right? If you go from triathlon, so I first really got more into road cycling, because again, it's a little bit closer to that triathlon pool, but you get dropped in a race like that. And like, that's it. There's no coming back from that. Triathlon, you don't do the right thing at some moment. It doesn't really matter. You've got the whole race. It's you against the clock. But if you make the wrong move in a road race, or for some pieces, even in a cyclocross race, you stumble over the barrier, or your chain comes off, or some small mistake, and there goes your race. So I think it's mentally difficult to overcome this kind of, it's a poor performance, but it maybe wasn't because you weren't physically fit enough. Yeah. Sometimes it's bad luck, and sometimes it's a stupid, tactical mistake, whatever it is. But you're then completely out of the race.
Well, that's an observation that applies really across the board, but I can see how, again, it would be specifically challenging to women because of cycling's tendency to have these tiny little racing fields for beginners, or horribly mismatched fields where you've got Cat 4s and Cat 1s mixed together.
Right.
And triathlon, I said this in our first episode, things I said in our first episode that have spurred controversy, right? I was saying that triathlon is participatory in nature and cycling is not. And I didn't necessarily mean that in a way to say cycling is better than triathlon. I don't necessarily think that, although I do think that because I like cycling, but I don't mean that cycling is better because it's not participatory. It's actually worse. It's harder to get into because you can do your triathlon and successful completion of the triathlon is considered an accomplishment. And in cycling, that's just not the case.
Right. And so I think as me being that type A competitive person, I liked that because it was like, if I'm not on that podium, this doesn't matter. So I have to get on that podium. Right. But for the, to have that mass field, you need those people who are going to consistently come in behind the podium and want to keep coming back. And if there's no recognition for those people, maybe they don't feel like they want to come back. Except
that cycling is inherently more fun.
Absolutely.
Right. I'll say that. I mean, that's not, I'll defend that forever. Cycling, riding a bike is the most fun. You want to talk about the sports and triathlon? What's the most fun? It's riding the bike. You want to talk about running in general or riding a bike? Everybody that rides a bike doesn't go back to running once they start riding a bike. So how do you get that message across? How do you say, hey, look, what you're doing, running 10Ks, sucks. It's actually no fun. I know you love it. You think it's great, but there's this thing you can do that I've been thinking about the different things that the title could be. I thought it should be something about being what's on the bookshelf, but I think it should be running sucks. We should continue our tradition of Mark naming the episode based on something.
Oh boy. But that's not how you get runners involved, because runners see that and then they're going to be pissed off.
Right. You can't call up. You can't, especially not if we're applying generic gender thoughts and going to say, what am I going to do if I just go to, what am I going to do? Show up at that, join the ARE listserv, figure out when the women's long distance run is, and then ride my bike up as they're meeting and saying, quit doing what you're doing. It sucks. Come with me. No, that's not going to work.
No. I would like to see that maybe, but that's not going to work.
No, I just go to the meetup. It'd just be like if you came to the CBRC group ride on a motorcycle and we're like, you're all dumb. Same thing. It's just like improving the technology. Or if we went to the people who walk around the mall for exercise and like you could run.
It's just like let's upgrade.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Technological upgrade. I don't know what the upgrade from the motorcycle would be. Some bro with a helicopter, maybe.
It's a big leap.
Yeah, well, I mean, once you get the motorcycle, it's pretty hard to beat that.
Yeah.
I guess.
Ferrari?
Yeah, Ferrari. That would do the trick, probably. Oh, man. So women's cycling and all the ways we can try to draw more people to participate in the sport. Here's a question then. Here's a philosophical question. Do we need to improve women's cycling?
I mean, I think so. I think it's tough because you kind of have to sort of bite the bullet and say, we're going to offer these things for women, and they might not come right away. And you might lose money on it. And I think that's part of the problem, is you kind of have to take the hit for a little while to make it welcoming in order for that to then pay off at some point. And, maybe those large fields of men sort of subsidize the women's fields for a while. But it's not going to make you any money right away. And so if a race is something that has to at least break even, you want to make some money. A lot of people donate that money back to something. You don't want to tell them we can't do that. But I don't see really another way around it when you want to make something that women want to attend and want to be part of.
Why do we want women to come again? I'm just thinking about all of this. Maybe we should just have a boys club. Don't. Maybe you're right.
No, but I mean, if you look on the national stage and the international stage, I mean, women's racing is pretty exciting and pretty awesome. And I guess
that's a I'm obviously being silly and sort of playing devil's advocate, but that's actually a great answer. This is really important because on the international stage, women's racing is by far the most interesting and most competitive racing that's going on right now. And if we want to grow that, you can't grow it by just having 4 people showing up at a regional series. A grassroots regional series that has 4 women participating in it is a joke. It's not even a thing. And it's not the women's fault. It's the fault of, decades of tradition and lack of creativity in the way that the events are organized that make it less fun for a woman to show up compared to a man,
Absolutely. And I think if you start at the junior level, so like an 8 or 10-year-old kid doesn't really care if I'm a boy or I'm a girl. They just want to go ride a bike, right?
Yeah,
like the gender stuff doesn't really get there at those younger ages, I don't think, as much, where they think this isn't a thing that girls do. And so maybe if I don't know how you do this, but if there's a way to get more, female juniors involved in it and give them the resources they need and educate their families about what this is, that's where you're going to grow somebody into a cyclist who isn't afraid because she's ridden a bike her whole life, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So now we need a women's junior program specifically.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I say that like seriously, like that's probably a thing to look at.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like when we continue, next time we sit down to talk about like, what are we going to do with the team,
we talk,
that's a thing to do.
Yeah, and we talk about how I got into running. You have a flyer in school, and that's all it takes to get a kid on a bike. If you,
there is a
NYCA for cyclocross.
Well, yeah, I mean NYCA is already that's already it. But NYCA, I mean, what's the percentage of boys and girls doing NYCA? I don't know.
I
Data Master.
I don't know. I think there are a few more females, but that's still starting more in the high school age. You're not getting them, at that point you're worried about who am I going to prom with, right? Like the gender stuff is there. If you go back further, maybe you catch them in elementary school and they're in that group where it doesn't matter as much.
So I think about this all the time. I have a daughter, which our listening public may or may not know. And one of the things I always think is that it's great that I have a daughter because I can do all of the boy things with her. And my wife gets to play dress up with her and do girl things that like a son probably wouldn't do. And of course there would be no reason that a son couldn't do these things. This isn't to judge anybody who does whatever they want. But I don't think people all think that way. I don't think that, everybody who has a daughter is looking at her as, an obvious bike racer and possibly a little league star and also, a starting point guard on a basketball team. Now are we talking about like a cultural shift though? Are we going to get 2nd grade girls out racing cyclocross, or do you think that we, I think that's to quote our recent podcaster, is America not ready yet?
I think
it's happening. Get that far.
I mean, if you look, I think there was a commercial during the Olympics about that. And I think we're at a point where, especially when it comes, I don't think it's going the other direction. Like you say, I don't think little boys are doing all the girl things, but I think it's so much more socially acceptable for, little girls to go do whatever physical sport they want. That's where you got to start it.
Yeah. This is a great brainstorm for our team. Yeah. It maybe I don't know if it's a good podcast or not. We'll find out later.
It might be terrible, but
I think it's a good one.
But so if there's anything I can, say to maybe this podcast helps get some women involved, it is a little bit scary, but you get through all of those things, and it's so worth it when you get to whatever your Northampton race is, right? And you realize, like, I can do this. I've overcome all these hurdles. This was a really difficult thing, but I did it, and it's okay. And then at some point, you become comfortable with it, and it's entirely worth it for all of those maybe awkward, embarrassing moments you might have. We all have them.
And to the men who are listening, keep in mind that the next time you come across a young female racer, it's important to treat them like they're there as a racer and not as if they're like that dumb blonde girl who doesn't know how to put air in her tires, because you know that if you've always known how to put air in your tires, then that's fine, but there's something else you didn't know how to do that somebody else showed you how to do, and they treated you with a level of respect that you may or may not be consciously avoiding when you're dealing with a female racer. So we have to be conscious of that. We have to make sure that this is an inviting community for everybody who wants to participate.
Absolutely.
Are we getting too heavy?
I know. Is this not fun anymore?
It doesn't have to be fun every single. I'm having a great time, first of all. So, okay. so I don't think it has to be fun to have a great. I don't think we have to be like hilariously laughing for this to be a great thing to be doing.
Yeah.
I know from our social media that we have women who are listening to the podcast. I know we have men who are listening to the podcast too. And I think that, if you want to listen, or if you are listening, you have to contemplate these things. Women, listen to Shylah. It's true. It's so worth it to get through it and figure out what you're doing and be able to become a competitor. And men, contemplate what she's saying. Contemplate the fact that, this is maybe more challenging for a woman to show up. So maybe, without being a creep, go an extra level to try to make sure that the women who are around you who are racing are dialed in and have what they need so that they can get to that opportunity to have that Northampton moment.
Yeah. And don't complain about your race being, at an inopportune time, because it allows these women to have a field of their own, which they should have,
I mean, that's a perfect observation, and we can go down the road of chastising some of the folks who've raised that issue.
But you know what I'm saying?
I will do it. I'll happily do it. There is always blowback from men who have been racing for a long time when we adjust things from a series level that we believe are making it better for the women to race. So contemplate that. The next time you were writing some social media comment about how you don't like something at the race, really think about why that change was made. And if that change was made because it advantages or makes a better opportunity for women to race, don't hit enter on that comment. You're not helping anybody by saying that, and it's the wrong direction. It's not coming back. So, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Shylah, it's been great having you on the episode today. Thanks for coming in and talking to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Do you have social media that you would like to share with our listeners if they want to get a hold of you, maybe to talk about women's racing or get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Instagram at Shylah W, SHYLAH W.
Easy to find you.
You're on a road team this year, right?
Yes. So this is as another piece is in order for me to find that camaraderie of women, I had to go out to a team that's out of Syracuse because we don't have anything locally. So, I mean, when there are that, few and far between women, you have to travel a little bit. So I'm doing that this year to get some women to ride with. Their team is called Cork Monkey, presented by Bike Loft East. So you can also follow that.
Everyone should check that out. If you haven't been following women's racing is about as intense and interesting as any racing that's going on right now, both on the road side and on the cyclocross side. So, check those things out, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Amateur Hour CX. If you have liked these episodes, please consider supporting us on Patreon to help offset production costs. You can find the link for that in the show notes below. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at mwalling. Eric pretends he's the show account, which you can follow at Amateur Hour CX on Twitter. Please make sure to subscribe in your podcast player so you get our next episode in a couple weeks. Thanks. See you then.
I think you're right. You're like, hey, make me a pizza. I can't. I took the oven and I hit it with a sledgehammer.